Hello, I'm Erica Harmon, Manager of Archives and Records at Eastern State Penitentiary Historic Site. Welcome to our final edition of Artifacts After Dark, a special Archives Month celebration of artifacts from our collection, streaming live from Cell Block 7 during Eastern State's night tours, which will be available from 6 p.m. on select nights through November 15th. For more information, check out our website or the video that will be posted directly after this live stream. Before we begin, I want to assure our viewers that although I am not wearing a mask for the purpose of this live stream, Eastern State is strictly following city and state protocols for COVID-19, and that I'll be popping my mask right back on as soon as we wrap up, so that our members in the audience can come take a closer look at the objects and ask me any additional questions they may have. This week's Artifacts After Dark theme explores labor at Eastern State Penitentiary and in prisons today. Let's get started. Labor was a key component of the founding principles of Eastern State Penitentiary. First, labor was structured for rehabilitation. The thinking was that incarcerated people would learn work skills that provided career opportunities as they re-entered society at the end of their prison sentences. Second, labor decreased the costs of keeping prisons open while making profits for the state. We still see both of these principles in prisons today. In the 1800s, many prisoners at Eastern State Penitentiary were employed in industries that could be done from their cells, such as weaving, shoemaking, and knitting hosiery. Prison officials purchased raw materials from outside business people. Incarcerated laborers then used those materials to manufacture goods, and these products were then sold to individual people or to businesses. Here we have a book from the late 1800s showing two prisoners knitting hosiery in a cell. A report released this year by New York-based advocacy group Worth Rises detailed 4,100 corporations that profit from the country's prisons and jails. It identified corporations that support prison labor directly or through their supply chains. The group claims such corporations exploit people behind bars through poor working conditions, low pay, and exorbitant markups on products. Prisoners working for the government face similar issues. In May, sanitation workers in New Orleans went on strike, demanding hazard pay, personal protective equipment, PPE, and higher wages in response to COVID-19. They were fired and replaced with prisoners from Livingston Parish, who were paid an unknown hourly wage. Prisoners today make less than prisoners incarcerated here in the early 1900s. Adjusted for inflation, the wages of a prisoner at Eastern State in 1915 would have been about 26 cents to $1.58 per hour. In 2018, Pennsylvania state prisoners made between 19 cents and $1 per hour, depending on the job. Most states in the country use the labor of incarcerated people to produce PPE, including hand sanitizer, face masks, face shields, and hospital gowns. In some cases, incarcerated people are not allowed to use the PPE that they are making. For example, some prisons consider hand sanitizer contraband or prohibited material due to its alcohol content. Like the examples above, Eastern State also benefited from the state use system, in which the goods and services produced by incarcerated people are used by the state. There are many instances of this historically as well as today. The book I highlighted a moment ago also includes photographs showing prisoners making bread. From that time up to the building's closing, the staff and prisoner populations would have had their meals prepared by incarcerated people working in the kitchens. Here we have another image of a prisoner in the hospital block's kitchen in the late 1950s. Since 2003, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections has offered a 9-week culinary arts program that provides intensive instruction in food handling and food preparation skills needed for employment in the food service industry. Graduates of the program have gone on to work as line cooks, prep cooks, kitchen managers, and chefs after their incarceration. Other graduates continue to work preparing food within the Department of Corrections. In addition to having a dye shop and providing shoe shine services to staff, people incarcerated at Eastern State clean the institution's laundry, which you can see in this photograph over here. SCI Phoenix, the newest prison in Pennsylvania, which is also located closest to Eastern State Penitentiary, currently hosts 3 correctional industries: laundry, garment factory, and shoe factory. Department of Corrections Secretary John Wetzel said in an interview that the department would take on laundry contracts to generate revenue. Eastern State prisoners could also be employed in the dental lab, making dentures. At one time, the shop was actually located behind me at the end of this cell block. In the photograph over here, you can see one of the instructors teaching prisoners to make dentures. Right next to it, there is also a dental tool. Similarly, SCI Cambridge Springs, one of 2 women's prisons in Pennsylvania, has an optical lab that makes eyeglasses for the Department of Corrections and other state-run institutions. Custodial and maintenance jobs for prisoners are listed as vocational trainings on most Pennsylvania prison websites, and certainly many people incarcerated at Eastern State were employed maintaining the building. Many former staff members and people incarcerated here have told us how clean the building was when it was operational. Some of the abandoned cells still have scrub powder, like that on the table, as a testament to the emphasis on cleanliness. In addition to the sign for the maintenance department that was found on site, some of Captain Roach's notes were found here and have given us clues to the management of the building. Unfortunately, when the sign was moved into storage in 1998, it was not recorded where it was originally located. In addition to maintenance, incarcerated people also assisted with major construction projects. This included building cell blocks 10, 11, 12, 14, and 15, the visitation room, the officers' dining hall, and the modern center tower. People incarcerated here also worked on the construction of Graterford Prison, which eventually replaced Eastern State. Over at the end of the table, we have a photograph of incarcerated people and staff working on the construction of what we call Soup Alley, a space used by prisoners to receive meals cafeteria style before making their way to the dining halls. For much of the 1800s, the state did not interfere with the labor practices at Eastern State, but several laws in the 1880s and 1890s curtailed labor at the penitentiary. An 1883 law in Pennsylvania required that all goods made in a penal institution be marked with the words "convict made," along with the name of the institution in which it was produced. Here we have a cigar box that was made at Eastern State, and on the bottom is a stamp that says Prison Made ESP 1934. The ESP stands for Eastern State Penitentiary. And just in front of the box, we have a photograph that shows the process of making cigars at Eastern State. During World War I, prisoners volunteered for the war effort via the Red Cross, making slings and bandages. Female prisoners knitted sweaters for the soldiers. Here we have a baby doll whose outfit was knitted by a woman incarcerated at Eastern State. Although we included this item in a previous edition of Artifacts After Dark, I wanted to incorporate it again, as it is the only item in our collection that we know was made by a woman, and it illustrates the knitting skills they would have used in creating the sweaters for the soldiers. During World War II, prisoners produced tent pegs for the War Production Board. Today, Federal Prison Industries, also known as Unicor, produces items for the military and other federal agencies. Unicor states that its mission is to protect society and reduce crime by preparing inmates for successful reentry through job training. Most federal agencies purchase supplies from Unicor. In 2015, Unicor employed more than 12,000 incarcerated workers who made between 23 cents and $1.15 an hour, depending on the type of work. Unicor itself made a profit of $472 million. Vocational training opportunities were also offered at Eastern State in the 20th century. A few of the trades included upholstery, automotive mechanics, architectural drawing, carpentry, and barbering. Each cell block had its own barber shop where prisoners, staff, and the children of staff were able to have their hair cut. This photograph in front of me shows a person wearing a smock that says 8 Block Barber. And around it we have some hair care products, as well as the barber pole that was found in the building. Barbering still exists as both a profession and a vocational program in most, if not all, prisons in Pennsylvania. People incarcerated at Eastern State could also work as medical professionals. The prison's first apothecary, a person who makes and provides medicines, was a prisoner. Prisoners also served as orderlies and clerks to doctors through the building's abandonment by the state in 1970. Just in front of a bottle that was found in the building, you can see a photograph of some orderlies pushing a person on a gurney near the operating room in cell block 3. We were unable to confirm in time for this program the extent to which the work is available in prisons today, since many prisons now provide health care through an outside contractor. We do know, however, that the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections permits prisoners to work in a medical capacity in their hospice care program, which is unpaid volunteer work. These volunteers are part of a support team comprised of prison medical staff, administrative staff, and chaplaincy, all of whom have cared for approximately 65 terminally ill prisoners, helping them die peacefully and with dignity. Before I ask you a few questions about labor that you can reply to in the comments, I'd like to draw your attention to a fire bucket that was found in the building while you consider the issue that has been of great interest to the staff at the historic site this year. California relies on incarcerated firefighters to battle the state's wildfires. This practice has been criticized for reasons of low compensation and because criminal records were a barrier to obtaining firefighting positions in the community. However, earlier this year, California experienced a shortage of firefighters due to COVID-19. This urgent labor shortage, led Governor Gavin Newsom to sign a bill making it possible for some formerly incarcerated firefighters to petition for firefighting positions after their release. The purpose of prison labor, much like the purpose of prisons themselves, remains hotly debated, and we'd love to know what you think. Please feel free to respond to these questions in the comments. Should people work while they are incarcerated? If so, what should their workday look like? How should they be compensated? Who should get the profits from prison labor? Prisoners, private companies, the government, someone or something else? We now have some time for any questions you may have. We'll start with those of our live member audience before addressing those of our viewers online. Does anyone have any questions?
Not so far. Might need a minute for them to come in.
Any members?
Could you tell us a little bit about the hair pick, where it was found?
The hair pick, unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly where it was found, other than somewhere within the complex of the penitentiary.
Can you pick it up and show it to us a little bit?
Certainly.
It's really interesting that it was here. I've never seen it before.
It is made of wood.
Do any Eastern State prisoners work outside of the walls, beyond the walls?
Sure. The question is if any Eastern State prisoners worked outside of the walls. We don't know of any examples of them working outside in the way that the California prisoners have been working outside, sort of further afield. But we definitely know that people were employed cleaning up the area around the penitentiary and caring for the lawn and that sort of thing. And also there was a storehouse behind the prison, which is now a playground where prisoners could be taken out every day to work. Yes.
If they didn't know how to do any of these skills, were they taught how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Like with the crocheting and the different types of skills that they needed?
Sure. So the question, in case you couldn't hear it, was whether people received instruction in these types of labor if they didn't already know them. In some instances, they definitely did receive instruction. In the very early years, overseers were hired specifically because they were able to teach a trade such as shoemaking and that sort of thing. We really don't know much about what instruction female prisoners in particular received. I can't speak to that at all. And as I said before, up through the end of the prison's operation, there were people getting vocational training in different things like upholstery and automotive mechanics, and I assume like the cigar rolling, they would have been taught that as well.
For something you just mentioned, upholstery, like if they take in work, or they do jobs for people who lived out in the community, like for instance, could somebody bring a chair in to be repaired or upholstered or?
Some people who lived in the neighborhood while the building was operational have told me that they were able to bring in items to be upholstered. I'm not entirely sure whether they would have to check in first or if they just brought a chair over and said, I'm dropping this off for upholstering. I don't really know.
If there's like a couple of questions. Michelle is asking, wouldn't the hair pick being made of wood be more dangerous than one made of plastic?
The question, okay, in case you weren't able to hear, with the hair pick being made out of wood, would it be more dangerous than one made out of plastic? I really have no idea the answer to that. I don't know. I'm not sure why they would have chosen a wooden hair pick. As a user of such an item myself, it seems like it would get caught in your hair and be very uncomfortable. But I guess you work with what you have, so yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
That's a good answer. So we have another question here. Did any inmates become well known for their crafts or skills learned in prison?
The question is, did anyone become well known for the crafts that they did in prison? Actually, earlier today I was talking with our executive director about a former prisoner who was an artist, and recently the York County Historical Society posted about his art, and he did map making for the government during World War II, I believe. So that was a pretty timely example of that. There was also a gentleman who made a lot of wood crafts, and when he was released, he set up a shop in New Jersey, and then he employed formerly incarcerated people when they were released, so he kind of paid it forward in that way. Oh, yes.
I kind of have a three-part question. How did the prisoners, did they have to earn the ability to work, or was it something that was given to them? And what did they do to make sure that they didn't use any of the tools to harm anybody else? Mm-hmm. And the other question was, were they able to do with the money that they made?
Mm-hmm. So there were a couple questions in there. I'll tackle the first one first. The first one was if prisoners had to earn the right to work. In the very early years, they were expected to work, and work was also considered a privilege. So if you had a misconduct, you may have your ability to do work in your cell removed. I'm not so sure about the later years, if there was some sort of period you had to wait before being assigned a job. I'm not entirely sure. And then the other question was what prisoners would be able to spend their money on. In the very early years, my impression is that you couldn't spend your money on anything, that you would get it all when you were released, or you could send it home to your family. And in later years, you could use it for commissary, which is kind of like a general store where you can buy things like razors and soap and other kind of personal care items, candy bars, some food items. These days, I understand ramen is very popular.
Thank you.
Okay. That seems to be all from online.
All right, I guess that wraps up all of our questions. Thank you again to our members and to those of you online for attending our final Artifacts After Dark at Night Tours. Since this is our last presentation, I'd also like to offer a special thank you to all of the staff who worked to make Artifacts After Dark possible, but especially Damon McCool, Lauren Zallett, April O'Brien, and last but not least, our camera operator, Val Ferguson. A video with more information about visiting Eastern State at night will be posted directly after this. Remember, night tours will continue on select nights through November 15th. Have a great evening.